Was it Matilda?
Matilda of Tuscany, yeah.
Of Tuscany, who my favorite CK3 character.
Oh, she's so good. It's really fun to play as Matilda of Tuscany. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, my eyes lit up when you said that. I was like, I know that one.
Yes. Oh, she played that blinder on that one, didn't she? She
Yeah.
was really like setting it up. She's like, you would do it at my castle.
Well, what I found
Saying.
interesting about your episode, that we're totally sidetracking, but this is what
That's like,
history nerds do.
mhm.
What I found interesting was when the Holy Roman Emperor enters like the court, she's sitting like equal height with the Pope.
Crazy. That's crazy. Like, who
Which
does
is
that?
awesome.
Matilda does that. I love her. Like, I'm really huge fan of Matilda. I'm a huge fan of the Empress Matilda. I'm a huge fan
Mhm.
of Matilda of Tuscany. I like all these women who are just like, no, I'm doing it. I don't
Yeah.
care. Like, they're fun. They're fun. I have to say.
Not to
So,
be confused, by the way.
no, no. Although I could understand why you would confuse the two. So,
No, yeah. All right, Christine, guess what time it is?
What's it time for?
Let me just go ahead and do this.
Pope Cancellus I has returned, everyone. She is risen.
The Pope hat has returned,
Mm-hmm.
which you can all see on our YouTube channel.
It suits you well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It shall remain on for the remainder of this episode because who are we canceling today?
We are canceling Pope fights.
Pope fights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a Pope on King, Pope v. President, Pope v. Daddy.
Pope v. Daddy.
Yeah. Like Daddy King.
We're going to party like it's the 30 Years' War again. Hey everyone, I'm Katelyn Burns.
And I'm Christine Grimaldi.
And you're listening to Cancel Me Daddy,
the show where we take a closer look at all the panic around political media.
With thoughtful analysis.
And verbal shitposting.
Christine, we're back at it again.
Yes, we are.
So we are about to have the amazing Eleanor Janega back on.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's been a couple of things in the news that have big historical precedents.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever Pope fuckery comes around, we just got to turn to her.
You know, this time, though, I actually think I'm on the side of the Pope.
Yeah, it feels weird.
It feels so weird.
So, for those who don't know, the Catholic Church, there's two things happening recently. Okay. First, the Trump administration threatened the Pope by threatening to create like an antipope that sits in America, kind of like the Avignon Pope. So, we're going to talk to Eleanor about that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that happened recently that I've found really fascinating is the Catholic Church declared this group of bishops called the Society of St. Pius X. They declared them to be in schism, right? So when you're in schism, it means, and we're going to go into this with more detail, but it means they are disobeying the orders of the Bishop of Rome, right? Which is, you can't do that if you're a Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these bishops and their parishioners and all these other people have been excommunicated, which is, as you know, a favorite topic of the show.
Is this kind of like with Mel Gibson's dad and his weird, like Australian, even more conservative than Catholic version of the Catholic Church?
Possibly. I'm not sure. But basically these people don't believe in the Vatican II Council, so they believe that masses should still be conducted in Latin. They have really horrific views about women and LGBT people, like even worse than the mainline Catholic Church.
And that's saying something.
So I think people get too caught up in they just have doctrinal disagreements, when in actuality, like, they're really, really, really harmful in their beliefs.
A question for you.
Yeah.
You know, the whole kind of tradcath movement in the United States.
Yes.
Is that more aligned with this version, this spin-off version of Catholicism?
No, I don't think they're associated necessarily, although there are some Americans in the society that I've seen. I think the tradcath thing is mostly an evangelical cosplay, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, the men try to be try to reclaim their crusaderness, and the women try to live up to the Catholic biblical ideal of womanhood. It's mostly a thing for converts.
Yeah, that's like a J.D. Vance special right there.
Yeah, they're always weird.
Mm-hmm. I'm really sorry to miss today's episode. I really wanted to talk to Eleanor again.
Yeah, with our travel schedules, we just couldn't make it work. But you'll be back for the next one. It'll be okay.
Yes, and Kate is going to take the lead in a robust history discussion with one of our favorite guests.
My favorite.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get into it with Eleanor. So, Eleanor, welcome back to Cancel Me Daddy.
Thank you, Katelyn. I'm delighted to be here as ever.
The people cry out for Eleanor Janega. We've had requests. I mean, we don't talk about good news on this show. So when people need a break from like real life, they're like, "Can you please have Eleanor on? I need to have something more fun."
Yeah, listen, let's just think about the medieval period for a little while. Go into your mind palace, decompress. Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
So the reason we wanted to have you on is there's all kinds of medieval shit happening.
Right?
Yeah. Wars, there's always wars, but also two things in particular I want to talk to you about today. And the first one is the Society of St. Pius X.
Ooh, schismatics.
Yes, very much, very drama. So these guys, like, not the world's best humans, I have to say. I'm allowed to say it. I'm a lapsed Catholic, okay? So any and all Catholic shitting is allowed today. So basically, the way it's reported in the newspaper is these people don't like the Second Vatican Council, and they want to go back to a more traditionalist style of church, which goes against the Roman bishopric, which is the Pope. But underneath it all is they are actually quite regressive, even compared to other Catholics. So their views on homosexuality are even more extreme than an already unaccepting church. Their views on women having roles in the church are very extreme compared to your average Catholic. So I don't want to let those things go by without mentioning that. But my question to you is, how excited do you get as like a medieval historian when medieval shit goes down in 2026?
Listen, I absolutely love it. To me, this is kind of like the equivalent of the bat signal. And we've had a lot of it this year. There have been like quite a few things that have happened where I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to actually cover this, which is an odd thing for a medievalist to have to do. But this is certainly one of those things because, by gar, we got ourselves an old-fashioned schism.
Yeah.
And I love a schism. I'm particularly interested in heresies as a general rule of thumb. And from the medieval standpoint, I'm usually kind of interested in heresies because I'm usually sort of pro the heresy.
Yeah.
Most of the time. So this is the rare case of the time when I don't like the heresy. So that's fun. That's always a good thing to do, I think. Yeah.
Always a good time. So to catch listeners up who maybe aren't following this very closely, this Society of St. Pius X, relatively small group of people, just a couple hundred folks, but I forget the right word for this, but they like elevated several bishops against the will of Rome. And I remember following it on Blue Sky as it was happening. Everybody's like, are they actually going to do this? Or are they going to back down? And then they actually went through it. And went through with it. And then the Pope is like, okay, you guys, we told you what was going to happen. Like, they've all been excommunicated. They've been declared in schism. So my first question is, what is a schism?
Okay, great question.
And my second question is like, how common is this in history?
Great questions both. And the answer is that a schism, essentially, when one is declared, what we're saying is that you now have a bifurcation of varying forms, in this context, more specifically of Catholicism. Right. So if what we're saying is that to be a Catholic is to be part of the Roman Catholic Church, accepting of the hierarchy that is established in Rome, these people are not that. Right. They are something else entirely. And, from a medieval standpoint, or even an early modern standpoint, that might mean, things like political shifts, or from a medieval standpoint, if you are declared a schismatic, if you're a ruler, for example, that means that people can come attack your country if they want, because it's like, well, you're no longer a Catholic / a Christian. So it's sort of like open season. So it's kind of like a threat a little bit, but schisms are not that common. And as a general rule of thumb, we've got sort of two major ones in the medieval period. The first is the Great Schism. And the Great Schism is when officially what we now call the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church break off from each other. Much to the chagrin, I might add, of the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church the whole time were like, guys, I'm the Pope. And I control you. And people in Constantinople were like, what is this? Because that's simply not the way the church was constituted when the church was first established in the late antique period, right? If you were the Patriarch of Jerusalem or Constantinople or Antioch or Alexandria, you have exactly the same standing within the church as the Bishop of Rome does. Like, the Bishop of Rome is the Bishop of Rome. Yeah. But the papacy spent centuries upon centuries basically building a pedigree for themselves, and they say over and over again, no, actually, I think you'll find Jesus gave our guy the keys to heaven, so we actually control the church. And everyone else is like, dog, I don't know what you're talking about. Like that's not a thing that we recognize. And eventually they get kind of sick of it over in the Eastern Roman Empire, aka Byzantium, and they're like, we're done here. Knock it off. And this is like brought to a head by certain things, like, for example, the Third Crusade, when the Venetians decide to attack Constantinople, and they're like, I can't with you people. So basically nobody wants the Pope around. So that's one big one. And pretty successful schism. I think we could all agree. We can agree the Orthodox Church still exists. We can agree the Catholic Church exists. The second one is what we call the Western Schism. And this is when, in the 14th century, you end up having two varying / vying papacies at first. One in Rome and one in Avignon. This is not to be confused with the Avignon papacy more generally, because the popes had been in Avignon, right? And they were just like, we're not hanging out in Rome anymore. Rome was essentially on fire. There were a number of civil wars. It had been ravaged by the plague really severely, and the papacy was like, no, thank you. We will be in southern France.
We're going to our cottage in Avignon.
Exactly. It's like the equivalent of you found out like during COVID, the people who had vacation homes, and you were like, huh, right? Sort of like the same thing, but with Avignon. And so we have a number of popes that happen over in Avignon, but then they eventually decide to move back to Rome, mostly because everyone was real pissed off about it. They're like, you're supposed to be the Bishop of Rome, make with the Rome. So they say, okay, they end up back there. Then what ends up happening is that the people of Italy want to see another, very particularly Roman pope. They want a new Roman pope on the throne, because there's been a number of French popes. They don't like that very much. They want a Roman pope so that they feel that the position is safe in Rome, right? They don't get that. They get a Nepalese pope instead. But basically what a number of the cardinals end up saying happened is that they were basically violently coerced into voting for this pope. So they all basically escape from Rome as quickly as they can. A, they don't want the Romans to figure out this guy isn't Roman. And B, they're like, we are genuinely worried that we are gambling with our safety. So they go back to Avignon, especially like the French cardinals, and they elect an antipope who was then in Avignon. This goes on for quite some time. The Council of Constance is called in order to attempt to deal with this. And they come up with a pretty good idea. They say, look, we're just going to elect a new pope. We're going to elect a new pope, and then you two jokers can do whatever it is you want to do, but like you've got to stand down, and we're going to elect this new pope here at the Council of Constance. So they do that. The popes in Rome and Avignon then don't step down, so now you got three popes. And the new pope, one of the Pope Alexanders, he goes off to Pisa, and the other ones are like, no, I'm the Pope. No, I'm the Pope. And for a while, a couple more will be elected, but then everyone just sort of like gives up on that, and
Yeah.
it just kind of goes back to normal. The Avignonese line does try to stick it out a little bit longer than everyone else, but no one's taking them particularly seriously. And then by then, we have sort of got onto the Protestant phase of things, and the Catholic Church has bigger fish to fry. So they just kind of get over it, right? So why the pious people seem quite schismatic is because, well, frankly, they are, right? So they're usurping a right that the Catholic Church certainly has, and one that is, again, a kind of medieval battleground, right? Because this fact that these people are trying to appoint bishops means that they are denying the right of what we call investiture to the church. And this is a big thing in the medieval period that we refer to oftentimes as the investiture contest, where before the papacy got particularly powerful, and indeed after it was fairly powerful, a lot of times bishops were chosen by the local king. And so, you'd put your brother in there, or a cousin or someone like that, someone that you knew is going to basically back you up. They're going to be like a good vibes for what it is that your family needs, right?
Sure.
Church takes a dim view of this. They say, actually, I think that you'll find we are the people who get to choose bishops, and kings are like, sure, buddy. When did this come in? And there's a lot of back and forth about this. This is one of the major reasons we see people get excommunicated in the medieval period, is that they don't want to back down about putting a bishop in place. And indeed, this leads to quite a very famous thing in the medieval period called the Walk to Canossa, where one of the Holy Roman Emperors is excommunicated because he's trying to put bishops in place, and he has to go walk to Canossa in the Italian Alps barefoot in the snow and stand outside a castle for 3 days until the Pope says, yeah, you can come in. I'm very important. You listen to me. I get to choose the bishop, right? So this is like a very massive political thing, is choosing bishops. And so by saying that these people get to confirm them, that is usurping power from the Vatican. Like, I'm just going to be so real for you with you, dog. You're not allowed to do that. Like, that's kind of like the Pope's whole thing, right? And unless you are the King of France, I don't really want to hear it off of you, like, even slightly. So, they straight up got told, don't do this, right? And granted, there is a huge history of people who occasionally tell the Catholic Church to fuck off, and the church says, please don't do this, and they do it anyway, right? Like my guy, Jan Hus, the Czech, who basically invents being a Protestant, he gets killed.
We talked about him the last time you were on.
He gets killed at the Council of Constance, right? Because they're like, Jan, could you not? And he's like, absolutely not. I'm not going to stop doing this. And so they're like, okay, well, we are going to kill you now. And he's like, great, I love that. Actually, I love being killed. And so it's sort of like, everybody kind of got what they wanted out of that one. And I think it's similar here. I think these guys really wanted the excommunication. Like that's what they're angling for, because they're very set on portraying themselves as sort of uniquely put upon by a church that is out of control, when, like, baby, this is just the church. Like, that's it,
You mentioned the walk in the Italian Alps, and actually you did a really interesting episode of Gone Medieval about that. Was it Matilda?
Matilda of Tuscany,
Of Tuscany, who my favorite CK3 character.
Oh, she's so good. It's really fun to play as Matilda of Tuscany. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my eyes lit up when you said that. I was like, I know that one.
Yes. Oh, she played that blinder on that one, didn't she? Yeah. She was really like setting it up. She's like, you would do it at my castle.
Well, what I found interesting about your episode, that we're totally sidetracking, but this is what history nerds do. What I found interesting was when the Holy Roman Emperor enters, like, the court, she's sitting like equal height with the Pope.
Crazy. That's crazy. Like, who
Which
does
is
that?
Awesome.
Matilda does that. I love her. Like, I'm really huge fan of Matilda. I'm a huge fan of the Empress Matilda. I'm a huge fan of Matilda of Tuscany. I like all these women who are just like, nah, I'm doing it. I don't care. Like, they're fun. They're fun, I have to say. So,
not to be confused, by the way.
No. Although I could understand why you would confuse the two. So
No, yeah. Yeah, I kind of wonder what the Society of St. Pius would think of Matilda sitting side by side with the Pope.
No, they would hate it. See, and this is the thing; they're not even a fun heresy, right?
Yeah.
And this is definitely also a heresy. I guess it would just be kind of helpful too to sort of define what a heresy is. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be real with you: a heresy is just whatever the Pope says is a heresy. Like it's not more complex than that, right?
Yeah.
So if the papacy says, like, I'm sorry, this is completely unacceptable, then because of the nature of the Catholic Church and the fact that there is an arbiter in the papacy, if the church says that this is a heresy, it's a heresy. Now, you can appeal that.
Mm-hmm.
You can try to argue the case, but if they don't feel like hearing it, they don't feel like hearing it. And so if they say you're a heretic and you're a schismatic, then you are ipso facto excommunicated, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then if you're excommunicated, I mean, if you believe the whole thing, then it's basically like you no longer fall under the remit of the Catholic Church. And in a medieval standpoint, that basically means you're going to go to hell. I don't know that they believe that anymore. I don't think that I don't think that Catholics believe that Protestants are going to hell, for example. A lot of Protestants do believe Catholics are going to hell.
I was just about to say.
So, yeah, I don't think that the same isn't really extended the other way, but yeah.
I'm always seeing like American Catholics who are like pro-life and they're partnering with the evangelicals. I'm like, do you know what they say about you when you're not around?
I just honestly, like, there's no sillier group of people. Like, you cannot work with evangelicals when you're a Catholic.
Yeah.
You just can't. It's like they think you worship demons, babe. Like, I wouldn't. I personally wouldn't, but okay.
Well, it feels like the Pope in 2026 is kind of having a moment, right? Because you have the first Pope born in America, although I personally think he's much more Latin American than he is North American.
He's given Latin American vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he served most of his life in South America, so that makes sense. But
yeah.
And interestingly, this is the original thing I invited you on to talk about, and then the St. Pius stuff popped up, and I was like, okay, we have to hit that. But the Trump administration and the Pope have been, I don't know if Cold War is the way to put it, but at least an exchange of words. And at one point, the Trump administration like made allusions to the Avignon papacy.
Yeah. Which I had to do like an emergency Gone Medieval about this because I was like, what is this? Because this is just the Trump administration all over, and by that, like, I mean in terms of the Catholic stuff, I'm blaming JD Vance for this, right? Because JD Vance thinks he's a Catholic. Listen, honey.
You fit right in on this podcast.
I'm sorry. Like, no. I'm not. I don't want to besmirch every single adult convert to Catholicism, but you people need to get your They're not sending their best, right?
Yeah,
that's all I'm
true.
saying. And like, so for example, him like writing this whole ridiculous memoir, and he's like, oh yeah, like, and then he's got like a picture of a Protestant church on the front, and I'm like, what is this? Like, you don't even know what a Catholic church looks like, my good bitch.
Yeah.
And he's doing it because he thinks it's like vibes. He's like into the smells. He's into the smells and bells, as we would say. And I get that. Like, I mean, the aesthetics are on point in the Catholic Church. Like, that's, I think that probably beaten by the Orthodox Church. I will give, because icons.
True.
What are you going to do about that? Like, really, the Catholic Church are just doing it better. But the thing is, it's way more than that. And indeed, you have to have a pretty good mastery if this is what you want to nerd out about on the topic. And it sucks to be JD Vance, but I do, right? And
yeah, me too.
Like, yeah, and this is the thing. It's like, so for example, because when they were threatening the Avignon papacy, I think that what they were trying to threaten was a schism. Right? Because they confused the Avignon papacy for the Avignon antipopes, which is not the same. It's not the same thing. Like, the Avignon papacy is completely legitimate. It's completely legitimate.
Right.
Everybody agrees on that. You might not like it. A lot of people were unhappy about it, but it wasn't illegitimate. And indeed, some of my favorite popes are Avignonese. So like Urban V, shout out to Urban V. That's my boy. He was a cool guy. He was a cool guy. Clement VI, he's real shady. I really like him because he's like very over the top. And, he's the one who kind of like starts it all. And, he's throwing these huge parties. I love his work. Huge fan of the Avignon papacy. And this is the thing, is that it's like, it's so half-assed, right? And it's also, to me, emblematic of like this sort of like faux intellectualism that surrounds J.D. Vance. Like, I mean, I don't know what the fuck they're doing at Harvard. He was Harvard, wasn't he? But anyway,
he was he was Harvard or Yale. Either way, like New England doesn't claim him.
I refuse to learn the difference between these institutions because they all look alike to me. Okay. And it's like faux, right? Because he's just like, oh, you ever heard of a little thing called the Avignon papacy? And I'm like, I did, bitch. Yeah. So what? You're gonna get Leo to move to that? Because that's what it would be. It would be that like Leo decided to move somewhere else. That would be the thing, right? Yeah. And even with the schism, this doesn't have to do with outside political pressure. Like there are certainly critics, for example, of the Avignonese papacy who say that, well, the Avignonese papacy were overly beholden to the King of France, which is crazy work, actually, because of like, as opposed to like all of the popes in Rome, who basically for quite some time came from like 4 families in Rome.
In Italy, yeah.
And that was fine. Like, just to be clear, totally chill and fine. Like, I wouldn't worry about it. And then also it completely obscures the fact that the King of France and the Avignonese popes are often at odds. Down to the fact that like the King of France ends up going and making like a really big castle in Villeneuve-les-Avignon, which is kind of like across the river from Avignon proper, just to be like, I just want to make it clear, like I don't want to see any popes over on this side of the river, So it massively obscures the fact that this is a not always easy friendship. Now, it is true that once you get to the Great Schism, for example, oftentimes political alliances form on either side. So in particular, like during the 100 Years' War, you will find French kings allying with the Avignon papacy and English kings allying with Rome, which is kind of like a surprise to almost nobody, right? Yeah. But the French kings didn't do this. So an application of political pressure doesn't have anything to do with either the schism or the Avignon papacy in either case. It has a lot to do with the fact that, people didn't want to be in Rome because it was on fire at the time, right? Like that's like number one. And number two, like the awful pope they elected was like physically beating people up. Like he was not...
Oh, dear.
Like, he's not a good guy, right? Like, I'm afraid the Napoleon are not, like, beating the allegations with that one.
I have seen pictures of Leo with the baseball bat, I will say that.
Just saying, right? So, like, it's just, I guess, a bit frustrating for me, because you kind of, like, throw around a buzzword, right? Like, they're throwing around this, like, they're like, oh, I know about this, and you don't, though, do you? Like, you don't, and it's, it's not the greatest sin of the administration, but it's just like incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it goes along with so much of their historiosity. I don't know if that's a word, but I think it's a word. It's at least close to a word.
It is. That's a word. Yeah.
Where they just make stuff up about everything. About everything. I mean, from the Odyssey, which it came out the weekend before we're recording this, and I saw it and had mixed feelings. But
I'm gonna see it next week. I know that I'm gonna have like picky feelings about it, but of course, when I do it, it's cute. And it's correct. And when they do it, it's wrong. Right? Like I'm not mad that there's a black person because like I like that part of the history because that's accurate. I'm mad when no men are kissing. Because that's not accurate, is it? So. Right, like that's what I'm going to be mad about.
Anyway, that's a big sidetrack that I want to avoid right now.
Sorry.
But like they make stuff up. Like we talked about a little bit about this, I think, in past episodes that had you on. But I think you're right in the analysis of like J.D. Vance about like he's sort of a cosplay Catholic and he wants the Crusader imagery. I actually think this is why a lot of American men have been converting to Catholicism is because they think that the 4chan memes about the Crusaders are real, and actually the Crusaders lost, homie. Like, hello.
It's so, like, I wrote at the blog, I wrote an article about this one time, like, where it's just a really weird thing to identify with because the Crusaders are losers, right? Like, they manage once to take Jerusalem, particularly because, the Seljuks were sort of new in the area. There's a very fractured political landscape, and also, like, no one knew what they were doing, right? Like, no one knew what they were up to. And then from then on, every single thing that they try doesn't work, despite the fact that they already have a toehold over there. And I mean, it just, even the idea that it's some kind of civilizational struggle is just laughable, as evinced by the fact that it's like the only time they win is because, like, there is no one big conglomeration of Muslims. But this is just white guys all over, right? Every white guy is an individual, and anyone who isn't a white guy is actually part of a larger, like, Borg blob where we're all the same, right? And so one of us is emblematic of all of us, right?
It's just, it frustrates the heck out of me. I mean, Christine and I, this is one of the most frequent things that comes up. We're doing bonus episodes now on Patreon where it's just the two of us chatting, and this comes up so often. As Labs Catholics, it drives us crazy. But, like, I kind of found amusement in the idea of, like, an American antipope.
Yeah, I think it's, like, really funny because also it's just interesting because the only people who would follow him, it would be like one of these ridiculous little schisms like the Pius guys. You would get like 200 recent converts because pretty much no actual Catholics in America would go along with this. And I mean, I think in particular, I've got big Catholic family, capital B, capital C, capital F, right? Who are mostly located in the Chicago area, much as Pope Leo was. And it is like one of these things where this sort of Catholicism has rather a lot to do with being like the children of immigrants. And it's very particularly tied with, I think, a sense of the old world and connections to that, and kind of wanting this throughway to family. And if you then introduce an American antipope, then you're cutting all of that off. And this is one of these differences, I think, that exist between, what you and I would call a cradle Catholic and converts, right? Because I'm like, oh, you don't understand what this is about. Right. Like, it is, yes, it's a religion, but it's a religion that is very closely tied with identity, and more particularly with kind of racializations of particular groups, right? So it's like, I'm sorry, but you are not going to be able to tell, and granted, there'll be like an 8th generation Boston Irish Catholic to follow this American Pope. Like, that is not going to happen, right? Like, there's no way that would happen, right?
Well, and Christine and I talk all the time about how, like, I was raised an Irish Catholic and she was raised a New Jersey Italian Catholic, and those are two very different things, even though we have similar traumas. And, like, I'd imagine in your case, I know that
Irish and Czech,
and like Chicago also has a big Polish community. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's like, where is JD Vance from? Okay, we're straying into xenophobia a little bit, I think.
Actually, it's fine to be xenophobic to Americans. I think it is denuded of meaning when we are applying the idea to kind of like the concept of the sort of deracinated white American, right? And I think that it's no surprise that when, you and Christine are talking about this, for example, it wasn't that very long ago that Irish people and Italian people didn't count, right? And certainly both my parents growing up in the Chicago area with immigrant parents, they didn't count, right? And which seems laughable now, right? But that's how whiteness works, and whiteness is contingent, right? And so if you are from one of those backgrounds where your whiteness has never been called into question, then it's just sort of fine. But it's like, I'm always telling people about this because it's not like the worst form of racism in the film 16 Candles, because like we all remember Long Duck Dong. But a big like set piece in 16 Candles, which came out, like after I was born, like in the 1980s, is about how Molly Ringwald's family are upset because her sister is marrying a quote unquote bohunk. So she's marrying a Czech guy. And it's all about like how they are like doing shots and they aren't classy and like how bad it is to like marry a Czech person, of which there are many in the Chicago area, right? And so like even in the 1980s, that was something that existed. So like my dad growing up on the west side of Chicago and going to Blessed Agnes of Bohemia Church, she's made it sainthood now. Go St. Agnes. Whoop, whoop.
That's awesome.
Like there's like a cultural context to that, right? And it's one that JD Vance simply isn't going to be a part of. And so it is absolutely fine, to convert to Catholicism. I think it's weird when I'm put in these positions, right? Because like I am myself not Catholic. I did 16 years of Catholic school. I have a lot of extended family who are Catholic. Some of my best friends are Catholics, etc., etc. But I've got a lot of problems with the church, for all the normal reasons, right? And indeed, I always say that kind of like one of the reasons I ended up as a medieval historian was I was like so frustrated. I was like, I want to learn everything I can about this entity because it frustrates me. And interestingly, I ended up feeling more softly towards the Catholic Church, but I think that's because in a medieval context, they're really not that bad. In a modern context, monsters. It's slightly different, right? And so I'm constantly being like, not the medieval church. You mean the modern church. You mean the modern church, right? Over and over again. But it frustrates me because I don't want to necessarily defend the concept of Catholicism, but then when you got JD Vance out here, I'm like, brah, don't make me do this.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, for our listeners, like, we have quite a few like queer and trans listeners. Like this podcast is started by two trans people, right? So I do want to point out that like I don't mean to glaze the current Pope or the Catholic Church because they are, they're denying abortion care in Catholic hospitals. They're buying up other hospital systems in order to deny that care. They're denying trans affirming care. So like, I don't want to make it seem like, despite the Pope hat, which is quite frankly a meme, I don't want to make it seem like I'm glazing them because I'm not. But in the battle between the Roman Catholic Church and the Trump administration, it's more complicated, right?
Yeah, it's more complex than that, as historians love saying. And so, it's absolutely the case, and I think that I do want to make that abundantly clear. Like the Catholic Church's teachings on homosexuality, transsexuality, abortion, birth control, all of these things are abhorrent to me. And I don't care if you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe. Like, that's not fucking acceptable in the year of our Lord 2026. And I mean, further, I just also want to posit that their treatment of women is abysmal. And that's before we even get to, like, the pedophile scandals, right?
Oh, so, let's not forget that.
Like, it's like a clown car of bad stuff. And yet I'm defending them.
Right.
Because that's how stupid this is, right? Like, it's just so on its face ridiculous, right? And because like the Catholic Church is insufficiently fascist for come on, man. What do you want me to do with this, right?
I realize that we have gotten off track.
Sorry.
I originally invited you on to have, although I'm fascinated by this, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk about, like, we talked about the antipope scandal, or I don't know, scandal, schism, I guess. Schism is probably the word.
Yeah.
But like, what other famous tete-a-tetes have there been between like big, powerful heads of state and the Pope? And like, is there something in the medieval record that we can look back on to be like, oh, Trump is just like this idiot king or something?
So yes, you can. You absolutely can. And that's what's so stupid about it is because like you don't even know what you're talking about because you can't, like, people have done it, right? So quite famously, for example, one of my favorite antipopes. I'm so cool. Sometimes I just say things and I'm like, wow, I'm so much fun. But one of my favorite antipopes is actually created by the Holy Roman Emperor Louis the Bavarian, not barbarian. Louis the Bavarian.
Okay.
And he is in a tete-a-tete with Pope Clement VI, who's over in Avignon, as I mentioned.
Uh-huh.
And basically, it's the same old, same old. He's trying to appoint bishops. He's being insufficiently deferential to the Catholic Church. The Church wants him to be doing particular things. He doesn't want to do them. And so the Church says, okay, well, that's it. We're excommunicating you, and we're going to elect a new Holy Roman Emperor, who ends up being my favorite emperor, the Emperor Charles IV. But Louis is like, guess what? I don't even care about that. I'm making my own pope. And he makes his own pope. He gets a Franciscan, and he's like, this guy's the pope now.
Yeah.
And the fun fact is, even then, no one listened to that. It's like he's got like a little antipope that he's sort of like keeping around with him, and he's like, no, this is the pope, and everyone's like, sure he is, Louis.
Yeah,
he's very important.
This is my little Bavarian pet pope.
And it's just like, so it could be done, but it would be essentially exactly that.
Yeah.
If America tried it, where they would have a little guy, it certainly wouldn't count. You would have to go, I think, to one of the already schismatic people in order to get it. So you'd have to go to the Pius Society, I think, and I don't think that they would be into it. Either just because it's so American that it would be a little like.
They're like, we're too Swiss for this,
right? It's like, so for example, it's fairly easy to get a Franciscan to do it in the case of this antipope, because in the 14th century, and especially during the Avignon papacy, the criticism is that these popes are having too much fun. Why is the Church, which should be living in apostolic poverty, essentially attempting to be like Jesus and the apostles, why are they building this lavish new palace? Why are they feasting all the time? From whence all the gold, et cetera, which are great criticisms that I'm fond of. And there is a kind of new heresy going around. They are called the spiritual Franciscans, and it's because the Franciscans have existed for about a century or so at this point. Okay. And as usually tends to happen after about 100 years, they start doing exactly the same things that they were set up to counter. Franciscans are started because for all of those apostolic reasons, and they're like, oh, why don't you just go out there and preach? But then they become very popular, they become very wealthy. So the spiritual Franciscans come about, and they're like, no, I'm serious. Get back to it. And the papacy is like, we already have Franciscans. You can't have more than one flavor of Franciscan. Stop that right now. And so the spiritual Franciscans are called into question. So that makes this a particularly good target if what you want to do is create an antipope. Right. And especially if you are Louis and you're trying to make a point that the Pope doesn't get to tell you what to do, you're going to want to get someone who is from like one of the echelons of the Church where they're saying, I'm not interested in power.
Yeah.
Right. So that all makes perfect sense. It's just that it doesn't work, really. I mean, it works in terms of it, like it pisses the Church off.
Right.
Sure. But it's like, Louis never really gets recommunicated to the Church. So if you believe all that, he's in hell right now. Like, he ends up dying on a bear hunt of a stroke, which is pretty funny. And everyone just goes, okay, agree to disagree. We're going to forget all that happened, right? So is it possible? Yes. And I guess that's what's kind of frustrating to me as a medieval historian, too, because you could, reference that instead of the Avignon papacy. Like, you could get it right, for example. It's available.
Like, do that.
but they're always talking about the Crusades. They're always talking about the Avignon. They're always talking about something like that is medieval in character, and they just flat out refuse to A, read a book, or B, baby, read the Wikipedia article for this. I'm begging you. I'm not even asking for a book at this point. I'm just
I have Wikipedia open on my second screen.
Listen, I want to be so real with you. I am a Wikipedia donator because I rely on them for dates because I'm a historian and we don't know dates. So, yeah.
Historically, how does schisms? I know we're jumping around here a little bit, but I think these are all kind of related to each other. How does schisms tend to resolve themselves? Because I think a lot of the times, I don't know if it comes from this Hollywood description of how the olden times worked, but it's not like the Pope can just call a war against a schism, right? They could call a crusade, which they did a couple of times against heresies in particular. But how are these typically resolved?
Well, sometimes they don't, right? Okay. Because the Orthodox Church exists. So, like, sometimes they simply don't. And it is, I think that is really important kind of testament to when we are considering the hegemony of the Catholic Church and the idea that the Catholic Church is this very powerful unit, which it certainly is. I'm not arguing that it isn't. But they fail to contain the Eastern Church within their auspices, and there's nothing they can do about it. They tried diplomatically a number of times to kind of get things back in. There's all kinds of like interesting maneuvers going on, but the fact of the matter is that Orthodox people exist, and there's nothing they could do about it.
Yeah.
However, what does not exist is like an Avignonese branch of the papacy, right?
Right.
And here, basically, I think that it was just considered so embarrassing that people didn't want to do it anymore. And indeed, part of this, I think, again, as I sort of said, comes from the fact that we start having these new heresies to contend with. So Hussitism in the first instance, and then Protestantism after it. Because they are so successful that suddenly there are bigger fish to fry. And in particular, both of these heresies, one of the things that they mention is the schism. Where they're saying very clearly, these people do not have their house in order. They can't even decide who is the Pope. How could we trust with our immortal souls these individuals to be any kind of spiritual guidance when they're beefing back and forth with each other about who the Pope is? Like, this is just emblematic of the deeper problem within the church itself. So when you start pointing things like that out, it's very embarrassing. For all concerned, right? Which is why the Council of Constance does attempt to get this new pope, and why you end up with 3 popes, etc., etc. So with this, essentially what happens is it just becomes incredibly untenable. And so all of those 2 other popes, they end up dying, and they die absolutely convinced that they are the Pope, despite the fact that we do not count them as the Pope in the records. They're on the antipope list on Wikipedia. Okay. Antipope list on Wikipedia, that's a 1. If you want to have a really nice time, that's fine.
We will link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, you definitely go check it out. You can lose a couple hours there. But the Avignonese popes, they kind of keep at it for a while, but nobody's taking them seriously. French people are not taking them seriously. Nobody's taking them seriously. They just have like quite a nice palace. So they're just sort of like, I'm kind of ruling this palace. I'm calling myself the Pope. That's what's happening now.
I mean, isn't the palace called the Palace of the Popes?
Yeah, it is. And also that's where we get, the Chateauneuf-du-Pape wine.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So shout out. We love to see it. So this is one of these things where it just basically becomes embarrassing. And that's because it is embarrassing, dog. Like, look at this. I'm like, look at this. This is like what we're threatening in terms of like Catholicism. It's incredibly embarrassing to try to keep it up. Like, you can't make these arguments within a structure like the church very convincingly, because fundamentally, the fact of the matter is the Holy Roman Church is a legal entity more than it is anything else, right? Like, what it exists to do is arbitrate the lines of Catholicism. And there is a head guy that you just have to go with if you're Catholic, whether you like him or not. And if he says that you're not in, babe, you're not in, right?
Right.
And so I do think that when kind of anti-popes are elected, there is kind of this hope that there will be a groundswell behind them, but it's never really happened, to be honest.
I like the idea of having these like 3 guys who all think they're the Pope, and they're just having a cringe off, and the least cringe ones wins.
It's so true. It's so true. It's like, it's incredibly, incredibly sad. And like, the thing is, that was a really good way to like let everyone back down. Actually, the whole the Council of Constance thing, that was good. Like that was like pretty good diplomacy. But everyone was just such a tit that they couldn't make it happen. So.
Well, Eleanor, this has truly been a pleasure once again, and thank you for coming on. And I wanted to ask, like, what do you have to promote to our listeners?
Oh gosh, rather a lot. I suppose that.
What don't you have to promote?
Okay, what don't I have to promote? If you're interested in more ramblings like this, you can always check out my little DIY podcast, We're Not So Different, where there's a lot more being like, damn, that says a lot about society, as opposed to Gone Medieval, which is my much more like, let's deep dive on Matilda of Tuscany podcast, which is very good. On History Hit, I have a new show out with my Gone Medieval co-host Matt Lewis that is all about the rise to power of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II, which I'm very proud of, which you can go check out. And very soon there's going to be a new episode out about medieval summer. So if you ever want to see me in a bikini, this is your best chance to do it. So I know that's what the people long for. So yeah, those are my major things at the moment. As soon as I finish this book, I'll be back on here making you listen to me bang on about ghosts, but that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you once again, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you again soon.
I hope so. I'll inflict myself on you anytime, babe.
I hope everybody enjoyed that interview with Eleanor, and we just wanted to say thank you for listening. If you want to support the show, go to our Patreon, patreon.com/cancelmedaddy. You can get episodes every week now, or early access to our shows.
Excited to join you next time.
Oh, you're still here.
I'm still here. Like Bob Dylan, I'm still here.
So if you want to get a look at our Patreon bonus episode, here is a little sneak preview. She worked as a researcher and a bilingual secretary in their London office after graduating university. Mm-hmm. So her job involved documenting human rights abuses and writing letters reading letters smuggled out of totalitarian regimes.
Cool. So now she's trying to create what she once tried to undo.
Well, she kind of didn't try to undo it before.
Yeah, so is this an escalation of her previous actions, or are we on the same...
This is long, long ago before she wrote the books. Mm-hmm. But she got fired from Amnesty International.
Really?
Because instead of doing her job, she was writing crappy wizard books.
Wow. Usually I would support someone at their day job trying to sneak in their novel on breaks or whatever, try to show that you're working, but not her.
I kind of feel like if your job is to read letters from totalitarian regimes so that your organization can report them to the public.
Yeah, maybe that's not like the capitalist hellhole that you want to fuck around with.
Cancel Me Daddy is a Flytrap media production, and today's show was made by me, Caitlin Burns, and my incredible co-host, Christine Grimaldi, along with our editor, May Schultz.
Dee Peterschmidt made our theme song, and Romy Tirico designed our graphics. Transcriptions by Heather Langefeld. Our thumbnails are made by Sarah at bursty.com. That's BURSSTY.com. Ads by Multitude Productions.
Our show is made possible by the incredible cancelers supporting our work, especially the members of our Canceler Hall of Fame, with the great power to cancel all of their enemies. Meg.
We appreciate your support.
Happy canceling!